The purpose of tonight's lesson is to discuss another ingredient of how to connect successfully with God. Tonight we're talking about faith. Now what we've been talking about is, number one, the Bible is God's Word, and if you expect the blessing of God, you have to respect His Word. We talked about that week number one. Week number two was understanding why God put us here. And we talked about creation, not how, but why. We don't have any idea how, except the small bit of information the Bible says, which is God did it. So, but we do know it's all about relationships, and the four relationships we mentioned in Genesis 1 and 2 are relationship with God, relationship with the earth, relationship with others, and finally relationship with ourselves, just being at peace. And I suspect that that's what everybody on earth wants. It's just to be at peace. Somehow find a little bit of peace. And lesson number 3 was about the fall of man, because in lesson 2, God gave them a choice, which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God said, if you eat of it, you're going to die. And what happened was they disobeyed God, which is all He's ever wanted, just obedience. I mean, if you could do anything, just obey God. Come on, it's the easy way. And but they didn't. So in Genesis chapter 3, they fell. And the consequences of sin were separation from God, and loss of connection, loss of peace, loss of relationship. And so basically all of those 4 relationships that we mentioned, we haven't done well at. So what we're on now is a quest to figure out some kind of reconciliation. In Genesis chapter 3, we saw the seed of woman, and so we're talking now about really Jesus. We saw that there's a sacrifice involved because something had to die to give up its coat so that Adam and Eve could have their sin covered, their nakedness covered. And so we know that in the big scheme of things early on that there's some kind of a cosmic struggle taking place. We also know that it involves somebody that was born into the world, a virgin birth, a seed of woman. So we obviously look backward and say that was Jesus. And the sacrifice itself, also Jesus. Then we went to the flood. And in the flood we saw a couple of lessons. Lesson number 1 was that God has His limits. You can push Him and push Him and push Him, and you might push Him a long time. But at some point He will be pushed no more. He has His limits. And that the ark itself was really a picture of Jesus. All those that entered in remain safe from the judgment. All those outside experience the judgment. And from that lesson, we also noticed that from a practical standpoint, the ecology changed. And the ecology meaning that now we have normally rain, we have shorter lifespan, we eat meat, seasons are harsh, and a whole bunch of changes as a result of the experience of the flood. So we're learning piece by piece and step by step how to successfully connect with God and get God to bless our lives. Now today we're going to talk about faith, because that is one major ingredient in this experience. And I'm going to go to the Old Testament benchmark for faith, which is Abraham, because Abraham is called in the New Testament the father of the faithful. Now, in the New Testament, he is referred to as the one who sort of authored faith. And every time they mention faith in the New Testament, they refer back to Abraham. So we're going to look at Abraham, because if in fact faith is required of us, what does that look like? How do I get some? what happens and what's the experience and how does this journey take place. So I'm going to read in Genesis chapter 12 right now, and we're going to talk a little bit about Abraham. It says, "Now the Lord had said to Abraham, 'Get out of your country and from your kindred and from your father's house unto a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless them that bless you. I will curse him that curses you, and in you shall all families of the earth be blessed.'" Now all of a sudden we have a major statement taking place here from God. And he's saying to Abraham, "Abraham, you're going on a journey. And on this journey, it's going to result in me blessing you and blessing the earth and blessing those that bless you, cursing those that curse you, and I'm going to create in you a blessing for the whole world to enjoy." And that's called what we call today the Abrahamic covenant. God made a promise to Abraham, and so now we look back to this, and this is really the basis of all of our faith and some of our experience. So here's what he said: "I want you to get out of your country and from your kindred." So what he said was, leave it all. Leave your land and leave your family. You can take your wife. That's it. And I want you to go. So it says, "So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him," in verse 4, "and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran." Now, Haran is where we would look today, is in northern Iraq. And he was there with his wife and this guy Lot, who was his nephew. So what we have here now is a huge step, just packing up and leaving. Where are we going, honey? I don't know. How do we know when we get there? We'll know. I don't know. And we'll just get the U-Haul. We're going. And his wife went, "Wow, I don't get this, but all right, I'll go." But it was sort of an incomplete act of obedience because Lot went with him. And Lot's going to be a little bit of a thorn in his flesh here because in this faith journey, he didn't quite get it right. And that's expected. On our faith journey, we're not going to quite get it right. And it's an evolution. And this journey that he's talking about isn't so much a physical journey as much as it is a spiritual journey. So it says, "And Abraham took Sarah his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their substance that they'd gathered and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came." So we say, wow, that was a short journey, one verse. No. This is not a physical journey. This is a spiritual journey. And this is going to take some time because he's trying to develop a faith life. And I'm saying it's not easy. You just can't jump in a phone booth and jump out faith man. You know, it takes some experiences, and it takes understanding God, and it takes having a history with God before you can really have much of faith. So the physical journey looks like it's over, but the faith journey is not. So in verse 6 it says, "And Abraham passed through the land into the place of Shechem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land." Now we know where this land is. Today this land we would call Israel. And so he left this place in what would be Iraq, and he went on foot a long way and ended up and landed in today modern Israel. "And the Lord appeared unto Abraham and said, Unto your seed will I give this land. And there he built an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him, and he removed himself from there, and he went to a mountain on the east of Bethel." Now this is interesting. Bethel means house of God. So he found himself at a place called House of God, which sounds like that's cool. You did the right thing. Your faith journey led you to House of God. And it says that he went on further and into a place called Hai, and he built an altar unto the Lord, and he called upon the name of the Lord. So you think to yourself, we got it made. He took his journey, found the place, there he is, calls on God, this whole thing's over, and it's not over. It's just getting started good. Because the next verse says, and Abraham journeyed going on still toward the south. I'm going, Abraham, where are you going, man? You found the place. Don't keep walking. You're there. Yeah. But no, he's not, because he's got to have some experience. So it says, and there was a famine in the land. Now, whenever you see a famine in the Old Testament, it always means testing. So there's going to be a test. How are you going to manage this test? Well, he managed the first test pretty good. He just packed up and left. But now he can't manage this test. I mean, we've got another test going on here. So it says, and Abraham went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. Sojourn means he didn't plan to stay long. He was just going to go down there for a while because there was a famine in the land. So he trusted God strong enough to leave Haran, but he didn't trust God strong enough to take care of him while he was there. So we've got to develop our faith a little bit, you see. It says, it came to pass that when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarah his wife, Behold, now I know you're a fair woman to look upon, and when the Egyptians see you, they're going to say, well, this is his wife, and they're going to kill me, and they're going to keep you alive. Why don't you say you're my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and my soul shall live because of you. So he's saying, they're going to call you into the king's palace anyway because you're pretty. But if you say you're my sister, then that's going to happen, but I won't get killed. So what he's really doing here is pimping out his wife, any way you look at it, to save his own skin. Well, there's a faith move, right? This guy's a spiritual giant, isn't he? He said, I pray you're my sister. And it came to pass that when Abraham was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman. She was very fair. And the princes also of Pharaoh said, commended her to the Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Exactly. I mean, she became a part of his harem. What kind of thing is that to do to your wife? This guy's a real giant, all right? No, not yet. He will be. And he treated Abraham well for her sake. And he had sheep and cattle and oxes and servants and donkeys and camels. And it says, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. So now we have another experience taking place. And his own lack of faith hurt somebody else. His own journey hurt another party. And the problem is that no man is an island. No man lives to himself and no man dies to him. You're going to affect somebody around you. And so now we have his faith, and looking at the outline, point number 5 there, it says faith begins. And number 6, it says faith leads you to God's house. And then it says baby faith is tested. And that's exactly what he has. It's being tested because it will never grow if it's not tested. And baby faith has fear. Yeah, they're going to kill me. And it also says that failure affects others. And it always does. So you can expect that whatever your shortcomings are, they're not going to affect just you and you alone. They're going to affect somebody else too. So he goes on, and it says, and Pharaoh called Sarah, or Abram, and said, what is this you've done to me? Why didn't you tell me she's your wife? He said, get up out of my land and go. And so he commanded his men concerning Pharaoh, and they drove him out of the land. And they just got rid of this guy because he looks like a scourge to us. I don't know what's going on here. Who is this guy, So chapter 13 says, and Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, look at this now, and Lot with him. So he still got this nephew. So this nephew is a problem because it really reflects incomplete obedience, you see. He hasn't truly obeyed God. And go back to Genesis chapter 1 and 2. That's all he's ever wanted was obedience. And he's trying to get it out of Abraham. It says, and Abraham was very rich in cattle and silver and gold, and he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, where he was from the beginning. So now he found himself back in house of God, which is kind of cool. And it says that, and there There he was at the first. And there Abraham called upon the name of the Lord. So now he's back with God again. So he had a little experience where he overran God. You know, he ran right past him. And now he's kind of come back and sort of, cool his jets a little bit and figure out how to connect with God at the spiritual level instead of just, he's running a little hot here. And so it says, Lot also, which went with Abraham, had flocks and herds and tents. Verse 6, it says, the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they couldn't dwell together. It says, and there was strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt then in the land. So now we've got this strife going on here. And so the struggle is, and if you look at the outline, point 11, new faith struggles with old ways. And it always does. You're not just going to all of a sudden come out angelic. You're going to have to fight with your flesh. You're going to have to fight with your own life. You're going to have to fight with your old way of thinking. And if you don't, you won't grow. So you got to have these struggles because that's just a part of the growth process. It says, and Abraham said to Lot, let there be no strife, I pray, between me and you and your herdmen and mine. Isn't the land before us? There to separate yourself, I pray, from me. If you will take the left, I'll go to the right. You go to the right, I'll go to the left. Now this is interesting because that's not something he was willing to do before, but now he's willing to just take whatever God gives. Before he was afraid of it, but now he's willing to take it, you see. So he's gained some ground here, hasn't he? He says, and Lot, it says, verse 10, lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered before them. And this is before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of God, like the city of Egypt, the land of Egypt, as you come out of Zoar. And Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves one from another. So somewhere along the line, you have to separate from your old ways. And you have to identify the old ways. Some of them are bad, some of them are not bad, some of them are hindrances, some of them are not hindrances. But at some point, you have to separate yourself from the hindrances. And it's very interesting here that it says Lot lifted up his eyes. Now, if you'll remember, that's the same trouble that Eve got into. She saw that the tree was good for food. So she's got now the lust of the eye going on here. Well, so does he. And he's actually now what we would call living by sight and not by faith. Abraham's doing just the opposite. He's living by faith and not by sight, because he said to Lot, take what you want, I'll take what's left. So Lot chose this place and went to a place called Sodom and Gomorrah. It says, verse 12, now Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. It says, but the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. So we know what this is. This is what we would call today sodomites. This is homosexuality. That's where we get the word. Sodomy is from this experience from the Bible, because these people were perverted. And we'll see as we go along that they were extremely perverted, and we don't have to make our own moral judgments about it. God's already made it for us. He calls it exceedingly wicked. It said, and the Lord said unto Abraham, after Lot was separated from him, lift up now your eyes and look from the place that you are north and south and east and west, for all the land which you see, this is the land I will give you, and it shall be to your seed forever. And so now we have this whole experience. After he separated from the old ways, more blessing came. You get this? More blessing came because he recognized the full obedience, and he recognized some of the hindrances in his life. Now, he's got more. They're coming up. He's going to have to manage them. But at least in this regard, he's got that much figured out, you see. So if you're looking at the outline here, it says the old ways lives by sight, point number 13. Point number 14 says faith is rewarded. And if you want the reward of God, then you got to have faith. You got to experience it somewhere. Now in chapter 14, here's what happened. Lot got tangled up with some of the local kings. And they didn't like him in there, his herd, they'd taken over the land, and so they decided to drive them out. Now, when I say kings, don't be too impressed, because you don't have to have many subjects to be a king. You just declare yourself, I'm a king, I got 2 kids, that's it. Because in this land, it's already a small piece of land, but there were multiple kings in the land. So all these multiple kingdoms, and they didn't like Lot being there, so they decided to drive him out. And Abraham said, oh, look at this, they've captured Lot, now we got to go and help him. And so I'm looking at the next point here. It says that faith acknowledges others. Because what happened here was Abraham had to go and deliver Lot from these kings. So he could have said, hey man, listen, you cut your own path. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It's what you deserve. I mean, you get what you know. He says, no, it's not just about me. It's got to be about those around me too. And until a person recognizes that, he's missing something in his faith journey. It has to include others. And that's one of the things that I feel strongly about in my own life. I give my life basically to others. And I go around the world and just doing the best I can to sort of influence others and educate others and help others. And I think that's just part of the faith journey. Now, if you look at verse 17 there, it says, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of some guy's name I can't say, and the kings that were with him in the valley of Sheva, which is the Kingsdale. So the king of Sodom, now remember, what do we know about this guy? The king of Sodom, what do we know about Sodom? These are wicked people. That's what we know. And exceedingly wicked before God. That's what we know. It says he came out and met Abraham when he was returning from this. And verse 18 says, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God. Now, get your head around this. And he blessed Abraham and said, blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him tithes of all. So watch what's going on here. Melchizedek, and I think this is an Old Testament incarnation. I think this is Jesus. He's the priest of the Most High God. And we don't even have a priesthood yet. We won't have that until over here in Exodus. But now he's called the priest of the Most High God. And we know from Hebrews chapter 7, and let me read something about this. And here's what it says. I'm going to thumb my way over if I can find Hebrews. And in chapter 7, it says, here's what it says. And by the way, Hebrews was written at least 1,500 years later. It says, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings, he blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all. First, being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace. He is without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but he's made like unto the Son of God, and he abides a priest continually. So 1,500 years later, it says of this guy, he's still a priest. So who could that possibly be but Jesus? And he doesn't have a father, he doesn't have a mother. This is the priest of the Most High God. And we know from looking at the book of Hebrews that the priest is Jesus. He's the one that makes intercession. But it goes back here now, and pay attention to what it says about him. There's only 3 verses about this guy. It says, he brought forth bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and that the Most High, he's delivered you, your enemies into your hand. Here's something that Abraham learned on his journey. He learned that whatever experience he just had, whatever victory he just had, came from God. He learned that everything I have comes from God. I am blessed because of God. I can't even draw a breath without God. So he's recognizing now, he's connecting some cool dots saying, I don't own anything in this world. It all belongs to God. And so for some reason, and I don't know where he got this notion, but it says he gave him tithes of all. So 10% of all he had, he handed it to this priest and went on his way. Why did he do that? I don't know. It just felt right. It all belongs to God anyway, so why not go this route? And so he learned that he has to honor God with his substance. And so he has to practice good stewardship. And I'm always of the opinion, and have been for 4 decades, that if you honor God with your substance, he will bless you with his substance. And I'm talking about physically now. And I conquered that in my life 40 years ago, 45 years ago, when I began to tithe to the Lord. And I give. And as a result of that, God blesses me accordingly and gives back. And that's just the kind of thing that happens, you know. God sends a guy like Ollie to me who helps me out and saves me idle. How much did you save me on that air conditioner? You know, thousands. You know, that's just God blessing me because I try to honor him. Now let's keep reading. It says, and the king of Sodom, now this is a wicked guy, remember him? It says, the king of Sodom said to Abraham, this is really freaky, give me the people and take the goods to yourself. Now this guy's a pervert. All I want is people. I don't want money. And Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I lift up my hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. I will not take anything from you, even to the shoe latchet. I will not take anything that is yours, lest you say, I have made Abraham rich. And I'm saying now, this is an interesting place to be. You have to get material goods in perspective. And he's saying, look, this isn't about me enriching myself. You know, there's more going on here. I'm not going to do this. And he actually had to make a moral decision about accepting the money. And his moral decision was, I'm not going to do it. This is dirty money. I'm not taking this. And besides that, everybody will know it came from you, and now you have some claim on me. I don't want that. I just don't want that at all. My trust is going to be in God, not in stuff. And I'm saying this to you, you invest your life in stuff, it's going to let you down. You don't own stuff, it owns you. And you have to put that in perspective. And I conquered that in 1973. I was a systems analyst in county government, and I was in charge of the payroll for the county, and I watched the money and the checks go by every other week, and here they go printing all this money. And after a while I said, is this it? Is this what life's all about? And I thought about the things that pass away versus the things that are forever. That's a verse of Scripture. And I thought to myself, my life is invested completely in things that pass away and not invested at all in things that last forever. And I said, I have to make some adjustments. 1973. And within 6 months, I had walked away. I was in the ministry. Walked away from my pay, walked away from my comfort, walked away from my insurance, walked away from my retirement. I'm just going to trust God. Well, that's part of the faith journey. That's part of the journey. Now, and every step I've made, it seems like I've always taken a pay cut, and I finally got myself down to zero now. So now I don't really have any firm income except the good graces of God. You know, and people contribute to my ministry, and if they didn't, then I don't eat. And that's just purely faith, and I'm comfortable with that. It says, chapter 16 now, it says, now Sarah, Abraham's wife, bare him no children. And you say, well, how's this going to work? If he's going to multiply his seed, we're going to have more people than you can imagine, and we don't have any kids. How's this going to work? And so Sarah said to Abraham, behold now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing. And I think that's probably true. I think he didn't let Sarah have children because he's got an agenda here. God's got plans, big plans. And he says, and this is what she said, humanly speaking, let me figure this out. I pray, go into my handmaiden, that it may be that I may obtain children by her. So why don't you go have sex with my handmaiden? Maybe she'll have a child. Maybe that'll satisfy this thing, because if we're going to have descendants, we got to have at least one son. And we don't have anything going on here. And why don't you go try that? And Abraham said, okay, that makes good sense to me, And he went, and he had sex with this girl named Hagar, and she got pregnant. And when she got pregnant, she despised Sarah, saying, sent me into this hairy old Jew, and here we are now. I got pregnant with him, and this is just more than I can think of, But if you remember, God had promised to bless Abraham's seed, and now here it is. He's spreading his seed around a little too carelessly, and the result of it is a guy named Ishmael. In verse 11 of chapter 16, and the angel of the Lord said to her, you are with child, and you're going to bear a son, and we're going to call his name Ishmael, and as far as we're concerned, this is the first Arab. And because the Lord has heard your affliction. And listen to this, verse 12, and he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So he's saying, this guy's going to be crazy, and his descendants are going to be. I mean, they'll strap themselves up with bombs and blow themselves. They'll do ridiculous. You can't believe how crazy these people will be. They'll drive planes into buildings. I mean, they're just nuts. And so we have this issue now where. And we're building in a conflict that we're going to see creating issues later on. We have a built-in conflict. So, and we'll talk some more about that. But now we have Abraham one more time running ahead of God. He shouldn't have done this. This was not the right thing to do. And if you'll understand this, the seed of Abraham was promised this land. And now these people are the seed of Abraham, and they want their land. I mean, they make a good argument because they're descendants of Abraham. And even to this day, they claim Abraham. That's what Ramadan's all about. Ramadan is acknowledging when Abraham offered the sacrifice. And we're going to see that in a second. So, now I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to jump to to chapter 21. And I'm moving fast here. I'm skipping over the flesh thing in chapter 17. This is when Abraham actually allowed himself to be circumcised. Wow, there's a statement of faith, isn't it? And we got this old guy, and he is overcoming his own flesh now. He's not being ruled by it. He's giving it up, if you will. All right, now 21 it says, chapter, and the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken, for Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And that's interesting to me because now Sarah's 90 years old and now Abraham's 100. So they're way past childbearing time. And this is a miraculous experience, and that's the way God wanted it. But it says, and he did this at the set time of which God already had a set time in his mind. And by the way, This wasn't a chronological time. This was a spiritual development time. If he's going to be the father of the faithful, I got to wait until he becomes one of the faithful. I got to make sure that his faith is sufficient. And in fact, the one claim to fame that Abraham had was found in, let's see, I've got it up here somewhere, Abraham's special qualification in Genesis 18 and verse 19. If you back up just one page, it's God said of Abraham, "For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him." So this is the kind of guy that I know if he has faith, he's going to raise his children to have faith. I like that. Instead of saying he's got faith, but he's going to let his kids make up their own mind. What? That's nuts, man. They want candy for every meal. You can't do that. You got to raise them. They're going to turn out the way you turn them out. And God said, I know Abraham. I trust him. He's going to raise he's going to be a person of faith, and he's going to have children of faith. That's cool. Very cool. So, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And so now we have a son born named Isaac. So you say to yourself, okay, we've finished the journey, haven't we? We know how this thing's going to turn out. He's got the journey done. He's where God wants him to be. Well, maybe not. Let's see. Let's put it to one more test. In chapter 22, now listen to this. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham. So what's he doing? He's testing him. And I'm saying that faith without struggle, it's untested. It doesn't work. It's not going to ever increase. You have to have what we would call progressive resistance. If you've ever lifted weights, why are you doing that? Because you know that the more I tax my muscles, the more strong they'll be. Well, that's what faith is like. The more you use it and exercise it, the stronger you'll be. So it says, the Lord tested him, and he said to him, Abraham, he said, behold, here am I. He said, take now your son. Now this is interesting. Your only son, Isaac, whom you love. So apparently, Ishmael did not get in Abraham's heart. Isaac got in Abraham's heart, because now we have the test. And he might even offer Abraham, Ishmael, no problem. But Isaac, no, this is my son. I've been playing baseball with this kid. I taught him everything. This is, He says, take your son and get into the land of Moriah and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell you of. We're going, oh my gosh, what? You're going to sacrifice this kid? Yes. And I don't know what went through Abraham's mind that night. You just have to ask yourself, what was he thinking? I'm 100 years old. And by now, he's 113. And we think that Isaac is 13 years old. So he's saying, how's this going to, I don't get this. But here's the point. You don't have to get it when it comes to God. He's got it figured out. He's got it all figured out. And by this time, Abraham has history with God. I can trust him. I may not understand his ways, but I can trust his heart. So, he's got history. And Abraham rose up early in the morning. Oh my gosh, no discussion. He rose up early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and he rose up and he went to the place which God told him of. And on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and will come again to you. So he's saying to the entourage, you guys wait here. The boy and I, we're going to go worship God. And I say, what in the world was he about to do? This is called worship. And I think that, and by the way, from a biblical interpretation point, this is the first time the word is mentioned in the Bible, worship. So from the first time you see worship, or any word, you have to pay attention to it right there, because this is the experience. And worship here means that I'm about to demonstrate to God that I hold nothing in higher regard in my heart than Him, even my son. That's worship. Okay? That's putting God in His proper place, putting Him up there and me down here, His desires and my desires. That's worship. Okay. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and he laid it on Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and the knife, and they both went up together. And Isaac spoke unto Abraham, and he said, My father. And he said, Here, my son. He said, I see the fire and the wood, but I don't see a lamb. He's saying, is there something going on here you want to tell me about? I mean, this is a test. This is a big test. And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they both went up. And they came to the place which God had spoken of. And Abraham built an altar there, and he laid the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son. And he laid him on the altar of wood. Now, I think there's stuff going on here. Because I think right here, Isaac, if he wanted to, could have run away from Abraham. I mean, he's 13 years old. His dad's 113. There's just no competition here if I'm going to want to get away. But I think Isaac said, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on here. But my dad knows God, and I trust him. I trust my dad, and I trust God. Which, by the way, is the test. Because Abraham's going to be the father of the faithful. Well, you can't be the father of the faithful unless the next guy in line is faithful. Otherwise, you weren't the father of anything. You were just ordinary, right? And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and he took the knife to slay his son. Oh, man. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, he said, Here am I. He said, Lay not your hand upon the lad, neither go and do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son. And this was really his dearest possession. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a ram was caught in the thicket by his horns. I mean, we walked 3 days. What's this ram doing out there on a 3-day journey? These guys just wander around? No, they're in somebody's herd, aren't they? And this guy's caught in the thicket. And he took the ram and he offered him for a burnt offering instead of his son. So we know this, and based on the next verse, Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, which means God provides. So Abraham has gone a long way in this journey, and he's at the point in his life now where he believes that God provides. God's going to make a way. God's going to make it happen. God's going to get it done. I don't know how. I don't need to know how. I don't need to understand it all. All I need to know is I trust him. And that's where this faith journey takes us. So it says here that faith realizes its purpose in the birth of Isaac. Big faith must pass big test. Yes, sir. Mature faith sees miracles. Yes, it does. And great faith is renowned. People talk about it. And so I find myself in this chart. I'm somewhere in this journey. I don't think I have this faith that is renowned, but I'm down the road of ways by virtue of the fact that I've been at this a long time. And I've allowed myself to trust God instead of to trust the system or trust our government or trust our paycheck or I just think that's how faith grows. So here's what we need to know about faith. It starts with a step. Just the first little act. Even though it's not a perfect step, it's a step. And so now we're on the journey. And so each step of the way and the day by day it gets tested and we grow and it gets stronger and we become more faithful ourselves and on and on. And this whole thing is really a growth experience. And that's what we need to know about faith. Because if we're going to connect with God, it has to start somewhere, an act of faith. But you don't have to have the end result of Abraham's faith. You can just have enough to get the ball rolling here. And you've started the journey. And that's the end of the story.